Just when Caroline thought the last betrayal had passed, a photo slid under her door, shattered everything she believed about her only remaining ally. As the final mask falls, Caroline uncovers a conspiracy that began long before her marriage, and only she has the power to end it. The truth is, no longer hiding, it's hunting. My name is Caroline Whitman, and for a long time I believed I was living a fairy tale. At 38, I had achieved what many only dream of: my name in print on best-selling novels, a loyal readership, and a quiet brownstone in Manhattan nestled between noisy lives. But what I treasured most wasn't on any bookshelf, it was my husband. Mark. He was the kind of man who could calm storms with a look, a financial consultant with a voice like warm silk and eyes that could soften concrete. Every morning began the same: a forehead kiss, coffee made just right, and a whispered reminder that I was his world. I believed him, every word, every glance, until one night everything changed. It was nearly midnight when I woke to an empty bed. The sheets beside me were cool, undisturbed. My half-asleep mind imagined he'd gone downstairs for a snack, or maybe to check the thermostat. But when I turned to find comfort in that excuse, I heard it, his voice, low, measured, calculated. She still doesn't suspect anything. I sat upright. The voice came from Mark's home office just down the hall. My stomach tightened. He sounded different, colder, like someone I didn't know. I got out of bed and tiptoed toward the door, my pulse pounding. "Everything's going as planned," he said again, the words clipped and confident. "Almost done." I pressed myself against the hallway wall, just outside his office. The door was slightly ajar, a narrow strip of light seeping through. I couldn't hear the other voice, only his side. But I didn't need both. My throat went dry. I crept back to the bedroom, climbed into bed, and pretended to sleep. Minutes later, I felt the mattress shift. He kissed my forehead like always, tucked the blanket around me, and lay beside me like nothing had happened. But something had. Something irreversible. That night, I stared at the ceiling until morning light spilled into the room. The next day passed in a fog. I moved through the kitchen like a ghost. Mark slept in, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. When I reached for my phone, my hands trembled. I had never checked our finances, not once. Mark handled everything: the bills, investments, and taxes. I trusted him. I thought that was what love looked like, but trust, I was beginning to realize, is often the first step to losing everything. I opened the banking app, my heart stuttered, transaction after transaction. Hundreds, small enough not to raise alarm individually, but collectively. It was a storm I hadn't seen coming. $750, $1,000, $500, 3 months of steady, discreet withdrawals. I gripped the counter. Behind me, a voice cut through the silence. "Checking the account this early." I turned. Mark leaned against the doorway, coffee in hand, his tone casual. But his eyes, there was a flicker. He hadn't expected this. "Just being curious," I said, forcing a smile. Some of the charges looked unfamiliar. He chuckled. "Oh, those just a few small investments. Must have slipped my mind." A sip of coffee, a practiced shrug. But I was watching him differently now, not with love, not with trust, with clarity. That night, I watched him more closely. He was glued to his phone, always placing it face down, always stepping out to take calls. I asked casually what he was working on. "Just business," he smiled. "Nothing for you to worry about." But I worried deeply. And that worry grew into something colder: resolve. 2 nights later, fate handed me my opening. It was after dinner. Mark said he was taking a shower and, for the first time, left his phone on the dining table unlocked. I stared at it. My breath quickened. I waited 30 seconds, then a minute. The water ran upstairs. I reached for the phone. My fingers trembled as ISCROLLED. At first it looked innocent. Work messages, calendar notes, casual banter. Then a message thread caught my eye. No name, just a number. The latest message read, "Send her the Ilium files. Just make sure she stays in the dark." Almost done. I read it again. Ilium files. Who was her me? My stomach twisted. I placed the phone back exactly as he'd left it and stumbled to the kitchen, splashing water on my face to hide the panic. Later that night, Mark climbed into bed, kissed me like always. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, just tired. But inside, I was screaming. He thought I was still asleep. That was his mistake. The next morning, I waited until he left for work. Then I called the one person I trusted outside of my marriage. Anna wasn't just my best friend from college. She was an estate attorney with the instincts of a predator and the loyalty of a wolf. When she answered, I wasted no time. "Anna, I need your help," I said, my voice trembling. "Mark's hiding something, maybe worse." I told her every withdrawals, The late-night call, the message about the Ilium files. She was silent for a moment. How much money are we talking? $500,000? Maybe more. Another pause. Then, Caroline, we need to move your assets now. I sat down, my knees weak. Are you sure? Yes. If you wait, you'll lose everything. We'll set up a trust. Lock it all down. My apartment, my book royalties, every penny I had worked for. I'm in, I whispered. The next 72 hours were chaos. Anna moved like fire. She brought in her legal team. We created a trust, retitled the Brownstone, transferred investments and encrypted access to every account. Mark would find nothing if he went looking. When he returned on the third evening, cheerful and oblivious, takeout in hand, I took the bag from him with a polite smile. He had no idea. The fortress was built, let him make the next move. I was ready for. Days later, he did. He came home early, wearing a tailored suit, his expression unreadable. He sat across from me at the dining table and slid a folder across. We need to talk. Inside divorce papers. I think it's for the best, he said, rehearsed and calm. We've grown apart. I opened the folder slowly, then met his eyes. Really, he nodded. Before we go further, I said, there's something you should know. His brows furrowed. What? I've already moved everything, he blinked. What? The apartment? The royalties? The accounts? They're all in a trust. You can't touch them. The color drained from his face. You. You can't do that. I already did. His jaw clenched. You were right, Mark, I said quietly. Life is unpredictable. He stood. We'll see each other in court. I stood to try. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. 3 days after Mark stormed out with nothing but a folder of failed intentions, I felt the flicker of peace return. I poured myself a coffee without glancing over my shoulder. I read in bed with the windows open, letting Manhattan's quiet hum fill the space he used to occupy. I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. It started with Whispers, my colleagues at Black Pine Publishing. The company that had published all my novels became strangely distant. My editor, who once gushed over every draft I sent, replied curtly to my emails. The receptionist, always warm, barely looked up when I passed by. The change wasn't imagined. It was precise, palpable. Then Rachel, my assistant, walked into my office, her face pale, holding a printout in trembling fingers. Caroline, she whispered, closing the door. You need to see this. She handed me a screenshot, an anonymous post on a financial crimes forum. CFO hides funds during divorce using company money. Underneath was a paragraph detailing an unnamed executive allegedly using company funds to create a personal trust, masking embezzlement under the guise of divorce, but the comments made it specific. Asterisk, I know who it is, Caroline Whitman. Look into her. My heart dropped. It was no coincidence. Mark, I said aloud, rage vibrating through my chest. Rachel bit her lip. If this spreads your career, I know, I cut in. I stood up, my knees weak, but my spine straightening by force of will. I need to call Anna. By evening, I was seated in Anna's office, the city lights behind her casting long shadows across the table. She listened, arms folded, eyes narrowed. When I finished reading the post aloud, her face darkened. He's playing dirty, she said, tapping her pen against the desk. Trying to force you into a settlement? He wants you scared. He wants you small. I leaned in. He's going to regret this. Anna's lips curled into a smile. We'll start with a cease. If he continues, we'll file a defamation suit. We'll need statements from your employer, proof that all funds came from your royalties and not company accounts. I have it, I said. Every royalty deposit is documented. Good. But Caroline, she added, serious now, prepare for more. He's not done. He WASN single quotes. 3 days later, Anna called me back to her office. Her voice on the phone was clipped. Urgent. He just filed a lawsuit, she said as I walked in. He's accusing you of financial fraud. My knees buckled. What? He's claiming you illegally moved marital assets and embezzled joint funds. But that's not true. The trust was made from my royalties. My investments, No. But now we have to prove it in court. She slid a folder toward me. He's not filing alone. I opened it. The name struck like a bullet. Ilomero. I stared at it. I've seen that name, I whispered. It was in the text message. The Ilium files, Anna nodded grimly. Ilomero is a fraudster. He's been linked to multiple scams. Forged document schemes, no convictions, but a long trail of destruction. I flipped through the documents. Fake transactions, forged signatures. Dates that made no sense. These aren't mine, I said. This isn't my handwriting. We believe you. But we'll need an expert to verify everything. We hired a forensic finance analyst, a sharp-eyed woman named Dr. Eliza Chang. She combed through every page, cross-referencing my legitimate accounts with the fake ones they fabricated. Each day blurred into the next long nights. Back-to-back meetings assembling a bulletproof record. My world shrank to legal pads, timestamps, and screenshots. But slowly the truth began to surface. Eliza traced the source of the forged documents and email chain originating from an IP address tied to Ilomero's defunct tech company. Some signatures had been manipulated using a scanned version of my real signature from old contracts. Others bore inconsistencies too sloppy to be mine. The most critical evidence, not a single fake transaction led back to my real accounts. Anna built the case piece by piece, and I watched stone-faced as the foundation of Mark's deception began to crack. A month later, we walked into court. Mark was there, sitting with his attorneys, smug behind his tailored suit. But the man I once knew had vanished. His confidence now looked like desperation. The courtroom was silent as the judge reviewed the submissions. Anna was masterful. Precise. She laid out the evidence like a narrative, brick by brick. When Eliza testified, she dismantled the fake financial claims. Line by line, Ilomero never showed. The ruling came swiftly, dismissed. Mark's claims were unfounded. Not only did he lose the case, but the judge ordered him to pay for my legal fees. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just breathed. After the hearing, Mark tried to approach me in the hallway. "You didn't have to do this," he muttered. I looked him in the eyes. "No, Mark, you didn't have to." And then I turned away. I returned to my brownstone that night, sat by the window. I didn't celebrate. I reflected I'd survived the unraveling of everything I once believed. But survival wasn't the end. There was still one thing I didn't understand. Why had Mark done this? What were the Ilium files? Who else was involved? And what was still coming? Because deep down I knew the story wasn't over. Not even close. The snow had begun to fall the day I discovered the folder. It was a quiet Tuesday morning, the kind of Manhattan rarely offered. I was clearing out Mark's old filing cabinet in the office. I used to avoid his private den. I wasn't looking for anything specific. Maybe I just needed proof that he was truly gone. Proof that I wasn't still tethered to the illusion of who he had been. What I found instead was a USB drive. It was tucked beneath a false bottom in the third drawer, hidden beneath paper files and old credit card receipts. There was no label, no identifying mark, just a plain black stick of memory sealed with silent intent. I stared at it, heart pounding. The last time I had touched something of his without warning, it shattered my world. But I had already walked through fire. I wasn't afraid of smoke. I plugged the USB into my laptop. A single folder blinked into view. There it was, the word from the text message. The ghost that had haunted my nights. I double-clicked it inside. Spreadsheets, encrypted documents, transaction logs, and one lone video file. The documents painted a picture web of payments that snaked through shell companies, bounced across offshore accounts, and circled back to a name I hadn't heard in over a decade. Simon Lattimore. My breath caught. Simon was a name from my past. From before Mark, a name buried in my first novel under the guise of fiction. A name I never expected to see in connection with my husband. Simon Lattimore was a financier turned fugitive, the man behind the 2011 Vanguard equity scandal. A former client of Mark's? Or so I thought. But this folder, these files, they told another story. Simon wasn't just a client. He was a co-conspirator, and somehow I was the final piece on their chessboard. I forwarded everything to Anna. Within the hour, I was in her office. She had her laptop open, files displayed like a crime scene. "This is damning," she said. "Simon's name is toxic. If this goes public, it could ignite a federal investigation." I was shaking. "Why me, Anna? Why involve me?" She clicked through a log of transactions. "Because you were the clean slate. Your accounts, your reputation. You were the perfect laundering tool if they could keep you blind long enough." I sank into the chair. All the fake investments, the secrecy, the small withdrawals, they had built something monstrous. And I was supposed to be the camouflage. Anna sat beside me. "Caroline, we need help beyond the civil courts. We're going to the FBI." That afternoon, we met with Special Agent Maya Sandler, a sharp-eyed woman with a calm voice and steel in her spine. I handed her the drive. She studied it carefully. "You're sure you didn't know any of this?" "Not until I saw that message." "And Simon Lattimore, I knew him once. He broke a lot more than markets." She gave a slow nod. "We've been trying to build a case on Simon for years. If this is real, it's the missing link." I swallowed hard. "He's working with my husband, or was." "Then we'll follow the money," she said. The days that followed were surreal. The FBI took possession of the files. My home office was briefly turned into a satellite war room. I was interviewed again and again. I provided bank statements, old correspondences, even copies of my unpublished manuscripts just to show where my attention had been while they played their games in the shadows. And then, a name appeared that shattered me. Emily had been my closest friend in grad school. We'd lost touch after she moved to London. I hadn't thought of her in years, but there she was. Listed as an officer in one of the shell companies. I called her immediately. She picked up on the second ring, Carolyn. Her voice cracked with familiarity. Emily, I need to ask you something serious. Are you involved with Mark Whitman or Simon Lattimore? Silence, then a whisper. You need to get out. My blood turned cold. Emily? What's happening? I can't say more. I tried to warn you last year. I sent you a letter, didn't you? I remembered. A strange, unsigned envelope with no return address. I had tossed it, assuming it was fan mail. Emily, please, I begged. They're not finished. Mark isn't just working with Simon. He's working for someone bigger. The Ilium files aren't the end. They're the beginning of what? She paused, voice breaking. Of the reason you were never supposed to find that USB? The line went dead. I stood at my window that night, the city glowing beneath a soft blanket of snow. I wasn't just fighting for my name anymore. I was fighting for the truth, and the truth had teeth, somewhere in the dark. Mark was still moving, and whatever came next, whatever waited in the shadows, it was coming for me. But this time, I wouldn't just be ready, I'd be waiting. 3 days after Emily's call, I found the surveillance photo. It came in a plain manila envelope, slid under my door like a ghost had left it there. No note. No sender. I opened it cautiously, expecting another threat or worse, a trap. But what I found instead was a high-resolution photo of a coffee shop on Fifth Avenue. In the center, my husband, Mark, leaned over a table. Across from him sat Anna. My breath froze in my lungs. The timestamp said it was from 2 weeks ago, right in the middle of our legal war. The same week, she told me she had filed the final paperwork against Mark's lawsuit. The same week, she assured me I was safe. Safe. I staggered back and sat on the edge of the couch. My hands trembled, the photo clutched between my fingers. Why was she meeting with him? Why hadn't she told me? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake replaying every conversation, every smile, every reassuring word Anna had said over the past month. Had it all been a performance? Or was there something I hadn't seen yet? The next morning, I didn't go to her office. I went to hers. I walked in unannounced. Her assistant tried to stop me, but one look at my face and she backed away. Anna was alone. She looked up, startled. Caroline, I threw the photo onto her desk. Her face drained of color. You said I could trust you, I whispered. Anna stood slowly. I can explain. You've got 30 seconds. She reached into her desk and pulled out another file, one I'd never seen before. It was a setup, she said. Mark asked to meet me. He offered me a deal money to slow the process, delay the filings. He thought I'd take it. My throat tightened. Did you? No, I recorded the entire meeting. She pressed a button on her phone and her speaker crackled to life. Mark's voice echoed through the office. You're smart, Anna. Name your price. Just slow her down. Then Anna's voice, cold and sharp. You picked the wrong woman to betray Mark. Get out. I closed my eyes. Relief and regret warred inside me. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to spiral, Anna said. I knew what you were already carrying, but maybe I was wrong. I should have trusted you too. I nodded slowly. The crack between us began to mend. Agent Maya Sandler called 2 days later. We've traced the last shell company, she said. It's headquartered in Zurich. And Caroline, there's a name attached. Who? I asked, bracing. Your publisher? Evelyn Cresswell. I staggered. Evelyn had been my editor for 10 years. A mentor? A confidant? She'd helped me publish every book. Maya continued. It appears she's been laundering money through manuscript advances, fake author contracts. You weren't the only target. You were just the cleanest. My stomach turned. She was using my name. Your name, your books, even your voice. The royalties were funneled through offshore accounts linked to her holding company, and Simon Lattimore sits on her board. I felt the world spin. Mark, Anna, Emily, Simon, and now Evelyn. Every piece of my life had been touched, poisoned. Maya's voice softened. We're issuing arrest warrants. But if you want to confront her first, we'll give you a few hours. You deserve that much. I walked into Evelyn's corner office that afternoon. She stood when she saw me. Caroline, she said warmly, I was just going over your next proposal. I know everything, I said. Her smile faded. Zurich, shell accounts. Simon, you used me. You used all of us. Her shoulders dropped. It wasn't supposed to go this far, but it did. I snapped. You're done. She didn't resist. She just nodded. You were always the one worth protecting. That's why I kept you close. I turned to leave. You kept me trapped. There's a difference. The arrests happened swiftly. Mark, Evelyn, several others are tied to the network. Simon vanished. A ghost once more. Emily entered witness protection. She gave a full statement, exposing a decade-long operation that reached far deeper than I had ever imagined, and me. I wrote. I poured everything into a memoir titled The Ilium Betrayal. It became my most successful work, not because of the drama, but because of the truth. A year later, I stood on a stage accepting a national literary award. Cameras flashed, applause thundered, but I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. After the ceremony, a journalist asked me, one question, if you could go back and warn your past self, what would you say? I smiled. I wouldn't warn her. I'd just whisper one word, survive. Because survival wasn't just enough, it was everything. Thank you for following Carolyn Whitman's journey. May her strength remind you that betrayal is never the end, only the beginning of your truth.